Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you may or may not already be able to tell, I have acquired a new microphone. This became a bit of a necessity when I finished recording my first take at this audiobook and realized the quality on each chapter didn't match. Considering I wasn't exactly happy with most of the first take anyway, it simply gave me an excuse to try it again with different quality and different takes. This gives me an excuse to try an experiment. I'm simply going to release these chapters as I get them finished, for the listening pleasure of anybody on Minds or Gab or any of the other sites that I drop this on who want to listen to some of my work. Once all 24 chapters are done and recorded and posted, I'll probably leave them all up on Rumble, YouTube, and BitChute for at least a week before I publish the audiobook on Amazon. If you listen to and enjoy the story during the time that it's out, which should be about a week or two, I would ask that you please give me a review on Amazon because that is where this audiobook is going to be going after this is done. I don't know if I'm going to follow these steps for every audiobook that I do, but I will probably post sample chapters of any kind of recordings that I do because I'm hoping to offer this service to other independent authors in turning their books into audiobooks. Recording this book twice and recording Vaxdemic when it comes back from the editor is probably going to be a great deal of practice, and I've finally gotten this process down. Now you all get to follow me as I get the process timed so I know exactly what my rate should be. With all that being said, please enjoy the first chapter of the first book I've ever written and published. Chapter 1. The noisy crowd was muffled in the locker room. Giant Slayer, the team's captain, anxiously stood by the door while Harpy, the vice captain, went over strategies with the team. Now if they call for standard, we'll be using Jumper to pull opponents to Golden Eagle and Giant Slayer, while Everest and I guard our flag, she said. If it's Maze, we'll use Jumper and Giant Slayer. That is if Jumper's new sprinters are ready. Xander? Harpy looked over at a tall man in a burnt and stained lab coat, who was moving between teammates adjusting their gear. They're equipped, but they're not tested, Xander said. They should increase his mobility by around 15%, but he should avoid getting them hit since I haven't found time to shield them. Jumper, Harpy said, keep that in mind. If your sprinters break, we won't be able to use you. Slayer? She turned to the captain. The captain, still standing by the door, did not respond. Slayer, she said more forcefully. Still no response. Frankie! She shouted. Harpy, the captain said, not looking at her. While we're in the stadium, you need to call me Giant Slayer. So you're finally listening, Harpy said. Good, because you need to pay attention. This is important. Remember, you're not invincible. Please listen to her, Xander said. I'm tired of repairing your equipment because you want to show off. Ignoring the criticism directed at him, Frankie looked longingly out the small window in the door. Harpy turned to face him, sighed, and asked, This is about Sledge, isn't it? Yes! Frankie said fanatically. He's the third biggest heavy in the league, and he's been single-handedly responsible for the Snow Bears' winning streak. He's also the first in 2 decades to use 2 great swords simultaneously. I can't wait to fight him! Look, Harpy said, putting a hand over her eyes. If you want to fight him so bad, we can call for elimination, but I doubt they'll pair him against you. You have a reputation for beating heavies. Your best bet is to go through the events and stick to our plan. She gave him a stern look. You always like to go off on your own and forget about strategy. Don't be too hard on him. He's the best player on the team. We should be able to hold out against these guys while he fights Sledge, said a small woman with a pretty face, violet eyes, and extremely thick blonde hair. Eagle, it doesn't matter how good he is, he needs to stick to the plan. As the team captain, he needs to set a better example, Harpy said. A buzzer sounded. Ashley, also known as Harpy, turned to the team and said, All right, everyone, battery test. Weapons on? Everyone picked up their weapons, while being plastic on the outside, were fashioned to look real. They hummed as they were switched on. Be careful, Ashley said. I don't want anyone stunned before we get out there. Pick up the rest of your stuff and let's go. Everyone grabbed the pieces of their remaining armor and made their way to the hallway that led to the field. Frankie led the group with a big smile on his face. The day was bright and clear as they entered the team's box. The large monitors on either side of the stadium read, Ununa versus Snow Bears. Harpy stood next to Frankie, who was electric with anticipation. Harpy sighed before saying again, "Please stick to the plan. This should be an easy win for us if you can just keep yourself under control." Frankie smiled at her. "I'll do my best, but I make no promises." He put on his helmet, a large flashy piece of armor that was adorned with decorative horizontal lines. It covered his head, leaving his face exposed. Harpy looked like she was about to say something else, but was interrupted by the announcer. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have a great match for you today. The Snow Bears are having their best season since their 2081 team won the A-Rank championship." There was thunderous applause from the crowd. "All right, pay attention. This will be the first time we get to see these guys up close," Harpy said. The announcer started calling out the top 5 players of the opposing team to general applause. After the first 2, it was Sledge's turn. "Now, the destroyer of men, the human tank. Everyone put your hands together for the Snow Bears' first-year heavy, Sledge!" A huge man charged the field. He stood nearly 7 feet tall and looked almost as wide. He wore heavy armor and a helmet with a long black visor that covered his face. He carried 2 swords, each around 5.5 feet long, with lighted purple strips that ran their length. As he strutted onto the field, he lifted his swords to the crowd. After the announcer called out the remaining members of the Snow Bears' top 5, he said, "The Snow Bears have been on a winning streak lately, but tonight they may have met their match. May I present to you Ununa! Please welcome their captain. He's been known as the Never-Ending Storm, the One-Man Army. He is undoubtedly one of the greatest men to play the game, Giant Slayer!" Frankie ran onto the field with his arms lifted into the air, yelling, jumping, and striking poses for the crowd. Women could be heard screaming when he took off his helmet, revealing his thick, sandy blonde hair. He bowed to his fans. "Show off," Harpy muttered. After Frankie had taken his place on the field, the announcer said, "And now Anuna's vice-captain, the vicious, the legendary, Harpy!" Harpy put on her helmet, a simple, unadorned piece of armor that covered her face and dark hair. Unlike Frankie, she did not try to excite the cheering masses as she walked to the line. Despite her indifference, the crowd cheered as if she were. When the crowd grew quiet, the announcer said, "Now for the beauty of the team, the fighter who comes down like a blinding ray of light, Golden Eagle!" Golden Eagle ran onto the field with her blonde hair billowing out behind her. She gripped a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. Before reaching the line, she tossed both in the air and performed a turning flip. When she landed, she was facing the opposite direction with her arms raised and caught both her weapon and her shield. A loud torrent of applause washed over them. She wore no helmet, instead wearing a circlet to keep her long hair out of her face. When the crowd grew silent, the announcer said, "Now for a man who truly lives up to his name, a man who is literally too big to ignore, Everest!" Everest walked slowly, holding his monstrous greatsword in one hand and quietly waving to the crowd with the other. He was easily the tallest man on the field, standing just over 8 feet tall, and his super heavy armor made him look much bigger. His helmet left the bottom of his face exposed, with a tinted visor covering his eyes. 2 lighted strips on top swept over his head. "Last of Anuna's top 5. He has the fastest mouth in the whole league and the legs to match. The lightning offender, Jumper!" Before the announcer even finished, Jumper ran onto the field, flipping, posing, and waving to the cheering crowd. After a few moments, he joined the rest of the team and stood bouncing on his new sprinters. He wore the least armor of his teammates, and all of it was white to contrast his black skin. He wore only enough to protect his torso and thighs from direct blows. "Let's hear it for Ununa!" the announcer said as their 6th-player Axel ran onto the field. His armor was plain and made his stocky build even larger. He carried a single 2-handed sword. Not being in the top 5, he didn't get an introduction. As the announcer spoke, the sides of the field shifted back, allowing the teams to return to their boxes, leaving a platform in the middle and a clear pool of water beneath. Long poles topped with camera-like devices rose up around the platform. "The first of our 3 events today will be 3 versus 3 blind. Captains, pick your players!" Frankie started to get excited, but his face fell when Harpy looked at him and shook her head. She then shouted, "Eagle, Everest, Axel, you're up." He returned to staring wistfully at Sledge. "Quit pouting, they'll use him eventually." The 3 selected players made their way to the platform as their information flashed on the screens to either side of the arena. "Now for you first-timers, allow me to explain the rules," the announcer said.
Players from each team compete to see who can knock their opponents into the water. The winning team is the one with players left on the platform. Not an easy task, as our sensory negation drones will randomly deprive the players of one of their senses for a short time. The drones can negate sight, hearing, and touch. Now, let's play blind! A buzzer sounded to begin the event. Golden Eagle charged forward towards her closest opponent, who jumped forward ready to attack with both his weapons. Golden Eagle drove the edge of her shield into her opponent's left shoulder, throwing off his attack. She then slipped behind him and brought her sword down on his head. As her opponent recoiled from the blow, she put her foot in his back and kicked him towards the edge. He stopped just short of falling and started to turn around. As she charged to finish the job, she caught sight of something moving very fast out of the corner of her eye. A second snow bear flew straight into the first, sending both men off the edge and into the water. Golden Eagle turned in the direction the man had come from and saw Everest grinning. She was about to speak when everything went black. "It looks like the drones have knocked out their sight just as 2 of the snow bears were knocked out," the announcer said. "Can they still win this round?" Axel could be heard pounding on his opponent's shield. "Follow the noise, like we trained," Everest said. They slowly made their way towards the fighting. Their sight came back in a blinding rush as Axel's opponent caught his sword and gave him a kick. Axel was disarmed and sent stumbling towards Golden Eagle. Both nearly fell over each other. With one massive push, the snow bear heaved both over the edge and into the water. The world suddenly went silent. As the last of the snow bears stood still, looking for an opponent, Everest moved silently behind him. The smaller man didn't notice him until it was too late. A savage strike sent him flying over the edge. When the sound came back, the crowd was cheering loudly. Everest lifted his hand and waved nonchalantly to the crowd. He slowly walked back to the platform that led to his team's box. After the applause died down, the announcer said, "It's amazing! Everest wins with a final, powerful blow! He took out all 3 opponents in possibly the shortest round of blind we've seen all season. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like the Snow Bears may have some trouble winning this one." "Good job, Everest. You should be proud," Harpy said. "It was nothing, really," Everest said as he moved to the back of the box. Axel and Golden Eagle made their way back to the box, dripping with water. Harpy turned to face them. "Axel, watch your footing. Eagle, you did well," she said. "It's not fair. That guy should have fallen. Evie, you took my knockout," Golden Eagle said. "I'm sorry. Next time I'll throw my guy somewhere else," Everest said. "Right, you did it on purpose, didn't you?" Golden Eagle said. Her accusation sounded more playful than threatening. Everest looked up and away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Eagle, call him Everest, not Evie. We're on the field," Harpy said as Golden Eagle gave Everest a playful punch in the arm. Axel took his place, cursing to himself and shaking water out of his armor. "I can't believe he hooked me like that. I'll find that little runt and kick his ass," Axel said in his strong southern accent. "I wish you could have seen your face when that runt threw you. You were all—" Jumper threw his arms into the air, waving them wildly and pretending to scream. "If you wanted to swim so badly, you could have waited till we got back. I'd have knocked you into the pool myself." "Bastard," Axel said. After he stared Jumper down for a moment, the two burst into laughter. "What a great first round! Let's hope the next is just as exciting," the announcer said. "This next event is always a crowd pleaser. Get ready, because up next is Maze!" More platforms rose from the water to connect to those from the first game. A wall with a door rose between the platform and the players. "The rules are simple. Both teams will pick 3 to 5 players to enter the maze. There are 3 podiums. If one team manages to activate all 3 platforms and keep the others active or eliminate all members of the opposing team, that team wins the event. The catch is any player eliminated can't play the rest of the game." "All right, Jumper, Eagle, Everest, you're in," Harpy said. "Slayer, I'm pretty sure they'll use Sledge, so this is the best chance to get it out of your system. Eagle, watch his back. Everest and Jumper, stick together." For the first time during the match, Frankie seemed to be focused. "All right, finally time to see if this guy's all he's cracked up to be," he said. The door to the maze opened. The chosen team members walked inside, and when it was clear no one else would enter, the door closed behind them. The red walls of the maze muffled the sound of the crowd, although they could still be heard. A layer of polarized glass overhead kept the players from reading the monitors to see who else was playing. The announcer said, "Now that all players have been chosen, let's play Maze!" A buzzer sounded and Frankie ran down the corridor to his left with Eagle close behind. He paused for a moment and listened to the crowd. "Come on, Eagle, I have a good idea where he's going to be," he said. "How do you know he's playing the game?" Golden Eagle asked. "The crowd told me," he said. They raced down the corridors. Whenever they came to a corner, Frankie would kick off the walls to conserve his speed. Golden Eagle kept as close as she could, but only managed to keep him in view. Suddenly, two opponents appeared around a corner. Both moved to attack. Golden Eagle raised her weapons, ready to defend. Frankie, in one swift movement, grabbed the sword arm of one of his opponents and fell into a sliding position. As he slid, he hooked one arm around the other opponent's leg. He stood up and yanked both opponents off their feet, smacking them into each other. Golden Eagle lowered her weapons and jumped over the tangled mass to follow her captain. They came to an empty room with a large podium in the middle. In the middle of the podium was a large lighted tile, big enough for a person to stand on. Frankie looked around the room, checking the other three entrances. He closed his eyes, concentrating. Golden Eagle took a chance to run forward and hit the tile with her foot. Immediately the platform lit up red. She turned around and saw Frankie disappearing through the door on her right. She sighed and ran after him. The crowd was roaring as the announcer said, "It looks like both teams have activated a podium, and two of the Snow Bears are out! What else would you expect from Giant Slayer?" Frankie stopped at the fork at the end of the corridor. Golden Eagle stopped behind him and asked, "What's wrong? Why are you stopping?" He raised his hand for silence. He looked to the left, then to the right. He took the path to the right, sprinting faster than before. Golden Eagle followed. The corridor was empty as they ran. The announcer said, "And down goes Jumper! What a savage hit!" Frankie made an excited noise and started running faster. They took a left, then a right, then another left. The announcer said, "And another of Anuna's players goes down!" Frankie took a turn to the left, and Golden Eagle could see pure delight on his face in the moment before he disappeared around the corner. They ran until they came to a second room. Near a door to the left lay Everest. Across the room sat Jumper. Both appeared to be unconscious. In the middle of the room, standing next to the podium, was Sledge. On either side of him were his teammates. Spotting them, Sledge hit the tile on the podium. It lit up blue. "I was hoping to run into you," he said. Frankie looked ecstatic and said, "So what are you waiting for?" With the discussion over, the two men charged each other. When they met, the room seemed to shake. Golden Eagle watched until she realized the two other opponents were moving in on her. She rushed the one on the left and knocked him off his feet. Frankie continued to assault Sledge, who appeared to be losing ground. Sledge attempted a counterattack. Frankie ducked and weaved, laughing as he went. The ground lurched. Sledge shook the floor every time his foot fell. Frankie started losing his footing, and Sledge pressed the advantage. Golden Eagle was having her own problems. Her opponents had a much easier time dealing with the shaking. They charged. She was able to dodge the first. She struck, knocking him out. The second struck her torso, knocking her prone. Frankie had adapted and was starting to press back on his assailant. Sledge was panicking, his attacks becoming wilder. Frankie easily dodged them and pressed on. Golden Eagle got back to her feet and noticed her opponent had turned to attack Frankie. She ran to stop him, but he was already too far away. Noticing the new enemy, Frankie refocused, turning to attack him. Suddenly, the new opponent grabbed his head as blood poured from under his helmet, and Frankie's right leg flailed around like a windsock in a storm. Frankie fell to the ground, shrieked in pain, and laid still. Sounding incredulous, the announcer said, "How did Sledge make that strike? His sword looked too far away!"
This has been a reading from the book Battle Games Book 1 by T. Alex Ratcliffe. If you'd like to find the full book, or the audiobook once it's published, follow the link in the description to my Amazon page. Also, feel free to browse the other videos on my channels, including book reviews from other accomplished authors. If you are an author and interested in having your book turned into an audiobook and having me read it, please contact me through the link in the description.